What's going on, fellas? So today I'm going to break down the 3 male archetypes that every woman loves. Now, fellas, I'm not going to talk about sigma, beta, alpha, and all that. Alright guys, this is going to be more practical because every man eventually falls into one of these 3 male archetypes in life. Now, how you fall into one of these 3 categories is how you connect and interact with the world, and also how the world sees you. Alright guys, so pay attention, take notes. Alright fellas, the first male archetype that I won't say a lot of guys fall into from what I see in the day-to-day world, but there are a small contingent of men who do. And that's the refined male archetype. Now let me explain this. You know who James Bond is. Or if you know who people like Kevin Samuel is, shout out to the OG. Or if you know people like Tristan Tate. Or people like Idris Elba. These are all men who fall into the refined category. And you'll notice the common denominator between most of these men is they're usually wearing suits, all right? Fellas, 3-piece, 5-piece, tuxedos, handkerchief in the pocket, all that shit. These men, based on just looks alone, usually represent power, status, social network, affluence, things like that. Now, this is the thing about these archetypes before I move forward. This is not unintentional. You don't just wake up one day and become refined or become the other 2 that I'm going to mention. This is intentional. These men that I explained, James Bond, Kevin Samuels, Tristan Tate, Idris Elba, all of these men have intentionally created their life to fit this archetype based on how they dress, who they interact with, how they talk, how they walk, hairstyle, everything, G. Okay, fellas? Now, I'm not telling you to be somebody who you're not. What I'm saying is eventually you will fall into one of these types. A lot of you guys watching this, you probably fall into the refined male archetype. Now, this is the thing. You don't only become one of these archetypes. What happens is some guys that sometimes use these archetypes to gain an advantage in life. I'll give you an example. To the core, I'm a rake. All right, I'm explaining that in a second. But to the core, I'm a rake. 80% of the time, the way I interact with women, the way I dress, the way I act, my attitude about life, how people interact with me, how I connect with the world, I'm on the rakish side. But when it comes to business, G, I'm more refined. I'm suited up, G, and I exuberate that in how I talk, how I walk, and how I sit. But in my interpersonal communications, I'm mostly rake. All right, fellas, so let me break down the refined again. You'll usually see these guys being CEOs of companies or hedge fund men. These guys usually are into politics. Refined men are more financially masculine. So when it comes to looks, money, game, and status, refined men usually have the status part down pat, also the money part down pat. Now, looks is also a big facet as well, and game is too. But it's more of money and status that represents a refined man. All right, guys? Let's move on to the rake. All right, guys, now let's talk about the rake. There's a large contingent amount of men who fall into the rake category. And to give a few celebrity examples of rakes, I want to say people like Drake, maybe Future, any lover boy. I want to say maybe Leonardo DiCaprio. I want to say Leonardo's probably on the more refined side. You look at people like maybe Andrew Tate can be a rake. So let me give you some examples of a rake. Rakes are usually personified by their rebellious attitude. Rakes usually have a lot of charisma. They usually have a lot of passion. They're very intense men. They're hyper socially aware, meaning they usually have street smarts, not only with men, but also with women. Now, in my perspective, there's 2 sides to the rakes. There's some rakes who are more on the rebellious outcast side, and there's some rakes who are more on the charming, charismatic side. But usually it's a blend of the 2. All right, fellas. Now, when it comes to the looks, money, game, and status, rakes usually represent more of game and also looks. Now, if you're wondering somewhere in the back of your head where these male archetypes fall in line when it comes to beta and alpha, fellas, I'm going to be honest. You can be an alpha whether or not you refine, rake, or rugged. All right, that's not the conversation. This conversation is more personality type and how you interact and connect with the world. So like I said, 80% of the time, I'm usually more on the rakish side. I really don't care how I dress. Although I take care of how I dress, I don't care how I dress because I'm not trying to impress people. But I still have the ability to win people over if I want to with charm and charisma. And I can admit, I do have an intense disdain for social norms and political views. And I'm very adamant and assertive about that. And I really don't care what people people have to say. The rake is less concerned being socially accepted by society, unlike the refined. Why? Because the refined man's status is usually based on his social network and what people think about him. That's probably one of the biggest differences between the rake and the refined. So let's move on to the last one, which is rugged. All right, fellas, now we're going to discuss the rugged. Just to remind you guys, in case I didn't say it already, all of these male archetypes are masculine. The refined is financially masculine. The rake is more socially masculine, and the rugged is going to be more physically masculine. Now, if I would think of famous examples of the rugged male archetype, I would think of people like maybe David Goggins and Jocko Willink. For all you guys who don't know who Jocko is, shout out to Jocko. But these are more rugged archetypes. Men who are more physical, men who use their hands. You will call them the man's man, all right? These are more blue-collar workers. And the way they attract women is usually through strength. Yes, these men have competence, but it has less to do with their social network and how they can actually connect with the world. More of what they can do physically. So they have a more traditional masculine style versus the rake. All right, the refined is traditional as well, but the rugged is more primitive. All right, guys, they like to use their hands. And they're just more tough, brute men. And a lot of women like that. So these are three types of men that all women love. There's all these different personality types and archetypes, beta, gamma, delta, all this stuff, bro. But when it comes to socially and how the world sees you in professional and social situations, it's either refined, rake, or rugged. And if you're not those three things, let me know what you are in the comments. All right, fellas? So I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Share this with a homeboy who this will help out. It's your boy, KD. We out here, baby.